Hey there. Welcome back to Storytime Live. I am Dr. Jennifer Bird. I am doing live streams on Tuesdays and Thursdays to talk about biblical passages that involve topics of great importance to me. So the topics of marriage, what we call marriage, sex, because that is one of the primary ways marriage is talked about in the Bible, and relationships or narratives or laws, things that talk about or narrate something about physical abuse that involves intimate body parts. I don't like saying sexual and assault next to each other because sex is good, assault is bad. Don't want to use the two to qualify each other. So that's the theme. Those are the themes I'm looking for as I walk through biblical passages, and trying to go somewhat systematically so that we touch on everything. And because I think it's kind of noteworthy how much content there is in the Bible that relates to these three topics. So we've worked through Genesis and Exodus. We jumped ahead and did the Gospel of Matthew. We did a couple stories here and there in Judges and in First Samuel, Second Samuel, looking at David and Bathsheba and David and his horrific response to what two of his children did, what one of his children did to the other, yada, yada. So we've kind of jumped around a little bit, but I am trying to somewhat go through it all. So we're going to do a little bit of a systematic thing here, getting back into kind of working through another book, and that will be the book of Leviticus. And not all the chapters relate, so we're not going to read all of it together. And as I thought about today's broadcast, today's story time, I decided that I did want to include some of the biblical passages, or at least one example from the Levitical content that doesn't apply to these themes. And the reason is I wanted to, if you've never read through the first few chapters of Leviticus for yourself and in a space where you could think about it for yourself, I think it's important that you do. And the reason is it's much more graphic, and it's the intent behind it is different, I think, than most people realize. And there's so much blood all over the place. And so one of the things I think is important to think about is I'm not judging when I make that comment. I think it's important to be aware and to think through what a different context it was. And therefore, when they have some really extreme responses to human foibles, that we keep in mind that the larger context here includes a very dramatic way of talking about or trying to reprehend or trying to get people to behave, right? So, so there's all of that. I do want to do a quick little plug. Thank you to all of you who do show up, are able to, and want to. It's really delightful to see that there's some people here live with me. Thank you to all of those of you who watch this later. There are a handful of ways that you all are already supporting me. When you subscribe, or when you encourage a friend to subscribe, that helps me out. When you pass along a link of one of your favorite conversations, that helps me out. When you are a patron of mine through Patreon, I'm at Biblical Bird, and there are a couple different levels there, and I don't have a whole lot of extra to offer you. There is some additional scholarship that's available there, as well as some videos that I created a few years ago on the topic of marriage in the Bible. And marriage in the Bible is why I'm doing this live stream, actually twice a week. I have a book coming out in November that is titled Marriage in the Bible, What Do the Texts Say? And this book is for a very wide audience, not just people of faith and not just people who left a faith behind or whatever. It's actually for a very wide audience. And so I'm doing this kind of conversation and content to put some ideas out there that are similar to what you find in this book that's coming out. What was the other thing I wanted to say? So, right, I am interested in inviting people to look at what's really going on in the texts, and then you get to decide what you do from there. I'm not trying to convince anyone of anything. I'm not trying to persuade anyone to believe or think anything. I'm inviting people to think critically for themselves, in particular when they engage biblical texts. So, hey there, Carrie Ann and Dadpool. It's very fun to see all of you. Thanks for joining us. So, Also, another way you can support me actually is in my second book is called Permission Granted. Take the Bible into your own hands. And it is a collection of content from teaching the intros to the two primary Christian testaments, the Hebrew Bible and the Newer Testament. I taught 36 intro courses in about 6 years. And so that book is pulling together all the most interesting kind of highlights or helpful conversations for the students that I taught, and putting it into a book form. So that's out there. I don't get much when you buy a used copy off of Amazon. Like, I get nothing. But if you're interested in listening to me read it, which is the Audible is me, then I do get some of that money. So that's kind of nice. All the things. Also, my own website has some additional content and editorials that I've written over the years, things like that. So my website should be in the notes. I guess it's not yet. I will go fix that. JenniferGraceBird.com. So thank you all of you for the various ways that you support me and pass along the work that I'm doing, because it makes this. That's why I'm here. Like, if you weren't doing that, I wouldn't keep coming back. And I think it's something similar. If I wasn't bringing something worth listening to for you who do show up, then you wouldn't keep coming back either. So thank you for the way that works here. And we're finding each other, I guess, is the thing. So that's great. So where we are, we're in Leviticus, and there are a handful of chapters at the beginning that don't relate at all to my filter, my lens. So I chose chapter 4. So I'm going to read part of chapter 4 of Leviticus. Just again, if you missed the first the intro here, just so that we have a sense of where they're coming from, right? That this way of talking about things was meaningful. It was relevant. It worked, right? All of those things. That's important to me. So it's kind of like I'm setting the stage for some of the other things. Now, again, we could have done this with Exodus and Deuteronomy, but we didn't. So but the book of Leviticus is a really interesting book to read if you haven't in a while, because that is where you get the kosher food laws, for instance, kashrut, what has developed to be called kosher food laws. All the list of all the different animals, the list of different, things you can and cannot eat. For none of it do we get the reason why. It's just don't. And there's a different reason for not eating shrimp than there is for not eating, animals without a cloved hooves, right? So we don't get any of the reasons. I think this is really important, because the reason in each legislative context here varies, right? The reason why this particular claim is made here might not be the same as the reason for the very next command that's made not to do, right? So again, that's one of the reasons it's one of the things I ask students to think about, who are taking a class on this. I just think it's important for us to think about what is being said, what that tells us about the community, what isn't being said, what we don't know. We don't know the motivations or the reasons that they thought, right? So we can't compare. Even for those who really, really want to adhere to biblical content or biblical intentions, we don't know. And it's impossible to know with some of these things. Okay, so chapter 4 of Leviticus, I'm not going to read all of it, but I just want to read a little bit, and then we'll go skip over some of the more relevant stuff. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the people of Israel, saying, when anyone sins unintentionally in any of the Lord's commandments about things not to be done, and does any one of them, here's how you handle it. If it is the anointed priest who sins, thus bringing guilt on the people," we just need to pause right there. The leader, or actually not even a leader, because priests weren't leading in calls to confession or leading in offering sermons. They weren't doing that. They were taking the sacrifice. They were taking the offerings and burning them or pouring them out as libations or whatever it might be. They were offering the sacrifices. That was the primary form of worship, right? So priests aren't even necessarily like offering moral guidance all the time. They're designated as that role between the people and God. So if a priest sins, they bring guilt on all the people. I just want you to think about that. I just would like to invite you to think about that's how ridiculous that is. Right? Okay. If it is the anointed priest who sins, thus bringing guilt on the people, he shall offer for the sin that he has committed a bull of the herd without blemish as a sin offering to the Lord. An entire fucking bull. Like, that's a lot. I'm sorry. It's a little early in the podcast, in the live stream for the F-bomb, but yeah, really, that's just extreme. That's a really extreme. That's a lot of meat. That's a lot of meat. It's not just that, though. Let's keep reading. He shall bring the bull to the entrance of the tent of meeting before the Lord and lay his hand on the head of the bull. The bull shall be slaughtered before the Lord. The anointed priest shall take some of the blood of the bull and bring it into the tent of meeting. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. The priest shall dip his finger in the blood and sprinkle some of the blood 7 times before the Lord in front of the curtain of the sanctuary. The priest shall put some of the blood on the horns of the altar of fragrant incense. Total random tangent, but notice that you have horns on the altar, right? We have that whole thing about being able to grab the altar because if you've needing to escape, someone's pursuing you and you need sanctuary for a minute. But we're actually talking about having bulls, horns as a part of the altar, but we're not supposed to use any sort of image or animal in the worship space. But here it's actually being talked about. And I've seen some of these, like I've seen them in sanctuary, in synagogue spaces. Really fascinating confusion in terms of mixed messages here. So the priest shall put some of the blood on the horns of the altar of fragrant incense that is in the tent of meeting before the Lord. And the rest of the blood, are you ready for this? And the rest of the blood of the bull he shall pour out at the base of the altar of burnt offering, which is at the entrance of the tent of meeting. So when somebody's blown it, okay, someone important, and we're slaughtering a bull today, just think about how much blood we're talking about, okay? I mean, if you're into, murder mysteries or whatever, where you end up seeing, like, sometimes you see scenes where there's a lot of human blood involved, and 2 pints is a lot of blood to spill all over the place. That's not even all there is in a human. If we're pouring out all the blood from a bowl and we're splattering some here on the curtain and we're putting some here on the side of the altar, and then over here we're just pouring it all out onto the ground at the foot of the altar. Are you all tracking with the scent this is going to give? This is at the door, the entrance to the tent of meeting. So this is, what is that? I don't even know. What is that? It's blood is sticky. It attracts flies. Right? We're not done though. Okay. So we've poured it out at the entrance, all of it, at the base of the altar, which is at the entrance of the tent of meeting. He shall remove all the fat from the bowl of sin offering, the fat that covers the entrails and all the fat that is around the entrails, the 2 kidneys with the fat that is on them at the loins, and the appendage of the liver, which he shall remove with the kidneys, just as these are removed from the ox of the sacrifice of well-being. The priest shall turn them into smoke upon the altar of burnt offering. But the skin of the bull and all its flesh, as well as its head, its legs, its entrails, and its dung, all the rest of the bull, he shall carry out to a clean place outside the camp, to the ash heap, and shall burn it on a wood fire. At the ash heap it shall be burned. But we're going to make an offering, a sin offering here of these particular entrails, and everybody loves the scent of a barbecue, right? So the scent is actually part of the atoning process here for these people. The belief that the Lord likes the scent that is wafting up, right? And there is a sense we get from some of the texts that people believed that they were, in a sense, offering that thing because it actually went up in the smoke, right? So the thing that's burning is being, there is no loss of energy, right? It's almost like there's a very kind of an ancient kind of an idea of that working with the way they talked about it and thought about it, that was feeding it to God, right? Giving it to him. It's an interesting idea. Anyway, so I'm not going to, if the whole congregation of Israel errs unintentionally and the matter escapes the notice of the assembly, and they do any one of the things that by the Lord's commandments ought not to be done, right? So we have a thing about that's next. I'm just going to stop there. So you get the idea. This seemed to be a good idea to folks, right? And that's my point here in terms of wanting to set a little bit of the stage. So we have in chapter 5, when any of you sin in that you have heard a public adjuration to testify and do not speak up, you are subject to punishment. Interesting ideas here. If you cannot afford, all these different things, concessions made if you can't afford what's being asked of you. In chapter 6, when any of you sin and commit a trespass against the Lord by deceiving a neighbor in a matter of a deposit or a pledge, or by robbery, or if you have defrauded a neighbor. Interesting. There's a nice little section here about how to handle financial errors or financial misdeeds. So chapter 7, this is the ritual of the guilt offering. It is most holy. And then we have another thing about slaughtering and all the entrails, right? All the things going on there related to that. Chapter 8, the Lord spoke to Moses saying, take Aaron and his sons with him, the vestments, the anointing oil, the bowl of sin offering, the 2 rams, the basket of unleavened bread, assemble the whole congregation at the entrance to the tent of meeting. When they'd assembled, this is what the Lord has commanded to be done. And so they have this thing about making Aaron and his sons the priests. And that's why we didn't read that because it didn't apply to my lens, my filter, but we didn't read the story in Exodus 32 where Moses, that is essentially a counter narrative to Aaron being Aaron and only Aaron and his sons being the priesthood lineage. So Exodus 32 is a counter to that, saying, actually, Aaron's not up for the job. We need to have any of the Levites who are up for the job step forward and do what needs to be done. And those Levites then show themselves to be worthy because they killed 3,000 of their friends and neighbors. As you do when you make yourself a priest. Okay. So anyway, chapter 9, we have more making people important. Chapter 10, Aaron's sons, Nadab and Abihu. Chapter 11 is where you start to get the animal, which animals are clean and unclean. And again, you don't get any of the reasons why a particular animal is considered clean or unclean. They just have lists and they say this list is clean and this is unclean. They do not explain why. I always ask my students in my Intro to Hebrew Bible course, it's a fully online class, so I don't get to do this in person, but I always ask them to tell me, to note. So what are the reasons for which animals you're not supposed to eat? And they always just give me the list, just the description of which is not okay. I'm like, well, at least you can read the text, but you're still not answering my question. The point is, we don't know. We can figure some things out. We can surmise, but we don't know, right? Okay. So that's all liquids and animals that you can and cannot eat. That's a Leviticus chapter 11 if you're interested in going back and reading that for yourself. All right, so here we get to something interesting that's related to our topic. Sorry, it's taken 20 minutes, but it's not just been for nothing up until now. Okay, so chapter 12 of Leviticus has something of interest, I think, to many of you, because it comes up in Newer Testament passages. It comes up also just in general about this question, at least in my mind, of, well, let me just read it instead of trying to summarize it. Chapter 12. The Lord said to Moses, saying, "Speak to the people of Israel, saying, if a woman conceives and bears a male child, she shall be ceremonially unclean 7 days. As at the time of her menstruation, she shall be unclean. On the 8th day, the flesh of his foreskin shall be circumcised. Her time of blood purification shall be 33 days. She shall not touch any holy thing or come into the sanctuary until the days of her purification are completed. If she bears a female child, she shall be unclean 2 weeks, as in her menstruation. Her time of blood purification shall be 66 days. Okay. What the hell is going on? What is blood purification for bringing human life into the world, right? So I am annoyed by this, but I also want to just say there's an element of ick here for them. I mean, that's really what's it's an element of what's the word I'm looking for? You know, when people are disgusted, it's an element of disgust. Part of what we see in the Hebrew Bible in relation to bodily fluids, bodily, night emissions, as they are called. Not that we've progressed much on that one either, but if a male ejaculates, technically speaking, he's not clean for I don't know how long, a day or two. I don't even know. It doesn't matter. The point is, for some, especially boys in puberty, they live multiple years unclean, right? When a woman menstruates, she's unclean. Like, what the fuck is going on here? This is about disgust. That's all it is, folks. This is about disgust. And so, I have some colleagues who are, full-time academics at universities and colleges, and they've been doing work with various theories that I haven't been able to keep up with in the last 15 years. But some of them have been working with disgust and affect. And I just think it's so obvious when you look at some of these biblical passages to say that a woman who has gestated for around 9 months, maybe longer, pushes something through a impossibly small hole and then brings this child into the world, and to say that she needs to be purified for the next month. Okay, I'm going to just do something nice here and say maybe it's somebody important had a wife saying she needs a break for a month. So let's just tell everybody that she's impure and that they'll leave her alone for a month. Give her a chance, give her a break. But it's not just that, right? Because females have twice as long. When she delivers a female child, she is considered impure for twice as long. It doesn't get any more just basic sexist than that. And to say that, it's not here, but it's related, to say that a woman's menstruation makes her ritually impure. And yet I just read to you one of multiple passages in the same book that talk about spreading blood all over the fucking place as a way to purify everything. So blood that comes from killing an animal, so blood that comes from taking a life, this is good stuff. But the blood that comes out of a female's body, most females, most of a good chunk of their lives, on a monthly basis, not everyone, but that blood makes you impure, makes you something that has to be cleansed. This is disgust about the human body. That is what we are seeing being talked about, legislated, directing people's lives. And for those who are faithful and conservative in a Jewish context, they are still adhering to that. There's still, because it's in a text from that is important to them. The reason behind it is not explained. And people are embodying, embracing, finding ways to make okay all these ancient issues, right? Ancient issues with bodies. That's pretty much it. and with sexism. So, so there's that. Natural body functions. Exactly. Anyone who's had to, oh gosh. I mean, when you start talking about human bodies in a really honest way, human bodies can be pretty disgusting. I'm not saying they can't. I'm saying we should just learn to be okay with that instead of thinking that this isn't what we should, So yes, anyone who has had to caretake someone else has had to deal with this and suck it up. Exactly. But why are we talking about, why aren't we doing a better job? I think we're in agreement here, Karen. I mean, it starts at infancy, right? Those little suckers are messy and just deal with it. It washes off, sure, it's messy, nasty, vomit, diarrhea, puke, shit all over the place, right? Yes, of course. Urine is sticky, all of that. It's life, it's bodies. Why are we denigrating human bodies? Why is it entrenched in this way of looking at humanity, looking at life in general, that the thing we're in is demonized so deeply and persistently, that people aren't being invited to get past that disgust about some of the stuff that our bodies do. And I think that includes when we're healing, like pus or whatever you want to, like when you have a cut and it gets infected and your body does some pretty amazing things to take care of that. Sometimes it pushes out some stuff that looks nasty, but I've got this weird cut that happened in the middle of the move, and I'm almost embarrassed by it because of the way my body like formed calluses and things around it to protect, because we were moving, and so I was constantly like getting dirt in there, and I just kept forgetting to cover it. And so I've got this, I mean, it's just a nasty, I don't think I can get it on there without the light making it look, it's a really nasty like callus that it's getting better, but like it kind of looks gross, and I should cover it, but it's also just so freaking amazing, right? My body did that, and just did it, I know that doesn't compare to sores that are oozing pus, but we have an issue. We have ancient people, the ones with the pens, the ones who got to write things out, got to write about things, had disgust issues, human bodily functions and fluid disgust issues. And so multiple faith traditions inherited that issue. And it applies to, ejaculation or female menstruation. It applies to any kind of healing process your body might be going through to keep you around. And we're labeling it as impure and disgusting or gross, not using the word disgust, but impure, right? So that there's an element of ritual impurity because your body is doing the functions it's meant to do. I mean, it is amazing to me. If you were to go through Leviticus in particular and rack up all the days in a given month that, just generally healthy young people, male, female, and since this is a binary text, right? For the most part, it talks about male and female. It doesn't talk about non-binary folks very much, but it tends to have laws in relation to binary existence. Just go in and rack up all the days in a given month that people would be ritually impure. It's pretty stunning, I think, and not really terribly helpful. I'm going to go, I need to keep reading chapter 12, and then we'll see if we want to keep doing more here, if we want to move on. Yeah, I mean, I am looking over the chat here today since I'm not on another page. Yeah, exactly, Jackie. What you're saying. Yeah. Oh my gosh, what is that about broomsticks? You guys are so funny. I feel like I need to go back and look at that, but this is it. This is the thing. This is exactly what I'm thinking as I've just been saying, right? Why did God make us that way if it's gross and impure, right? No, that's not God isn't uncomfortable. If there's a being or some sort of energy thing that you want to call God in this universe, that God is perfectly fine. That God doesn't have sentience in the way that we do, first of all. But second of all, that God is perfectly fine with your body doing everything that it does because it is important. All of it is relevant to keeping us alive. And so, yeah, none of that's impure. In my very biased and strong opinion, none of that would be considered impure. This is the humans having an issue with bodily functions, and they need to just get over it. But unfortunately, it's just encoded. You know what I'm saying? Okay, let me finish chapter 12, and then we'll see where else we need to go today. So that we just wrapped up. If she bears a female child, her menstruation is twice as, or her blood purification shall be 2.5 months. That's so weird. When the days of her purification are completed, whether for a son or for a daughter, she shall bring to the priest at the entrance of the tent of meeting a lamb in its first year for a burnt offering, and a pigeon or a turtle dove for a sin offering. He shall offer it before the Lord and make atonement on her behalf. Then she shall be clean from her flow of blood. I mean, I assume they mean the flow of blood that came out when she pushed a baby out, right? And all the placenta? Are they referring to the placenta there? Because the flow of blood sounds more like menstruation, but we're talking about after. Yeah, so they must be referring to the placenta. Anyway, this is the law for her who bears a child, male or female. If she cannot afford a sheep, she shall take 2 turtle doves or 2 pigeons. And that becomes noteworthy because that's what Jesus's mother does in Luke. She brings 2 turtle doves to a poor family. If she cannot afford a sheep, she shall take 2 turtle doves or 2 pigeons, one for a burnt offering and the other for a sin offering. Again, sin offering, we just pushed a baby out of vagina. There's no sin involved here. Whatever. And the priest shall make atonement on her behalf, and she shall be clean. So again, I don't need to keep repeating what I'm saying. I think if you've listened to the whole thing, you're tracking with me, and I'm pretty sure I made my point here that this is about human disgust issues, not what would make sense for a God who created the human body to be saying about us, right? Okay. I saw someone say in the comments, yeah, I'm totally agreeing with God is written by men for men, making men think. Yeah, that's for sure. I saw someone say that they hadn't heard about the animal sacrifices. So this isn't actually technically in my filter or the filter or theme for this story time, but I'm going to go ahead and read the next chapter. I'm assuming that you're okay with that. And, if you're not, you're going to drop out, and that's okay too. But I'll read part of it. I'm not going to read all of it. It's a very long chapter, actually. And it's about skin issues. So not my theme, but I'm going to read part of it just again to give you an idea what's going on here. So chapter 13, then, the next chapter. The Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, since Aaron has now been, made official. When a person has on the skin of his body a swelling or an eruption or a spot, and it turns into a leprous disease on the skin of his body, he shall be brought to Aaron the priest or to one of his sons, the priests. There's a footnote in this version of the Bible that says we're not sure what they mean by that leprous disease on the skin. And I'm wondering if there's another footnote here. The footnote says that, and sometimes they have extended notes. Chapter 13. Right. So the footnotes in the NRSV talks about various symptoms are enumerated for determining whether a condition is surface affliction. In each case, the priest must give a ruling regarding the skin disease, differentiating between clean and unclean. So inclusion of conditions affecting fabrics and houses alongside human disease also rules out modern leprosy, as do the symptoms of the human diseases described. The priestly authors do not view disease in general as causing impurity. Surface affliction causes impurity because it's associated with death. It's very interesting because, well, anyway. So, okay, I'll just keep going. So we're talking about some form of skin issues. Again, if it's an actual disease and not just your body healing itself, right? That's different, right? But okay. All right. The priest, so they brought themselves to Aaron or to his sons. The priest shall examine the disease on the skin of his body, and if the hair in the diseased area has turned white, and the disease appears to be deeper than the skin of his body, it is a leprous disease. After the priest has examined him, he shall pronounce him ceremonially unclean. But if the spot is white in the skin of his body and appears no deeper than the skin, and the hair in it has not turned white, the priest shall confine the diseased person for 7 days. The priest shall examine him on the 7th day, and if he sees that the disease is checked and the disease has not spread in the skin, then the priest shall confine him 7 days more. So this is more like you have some sort of abscess that needs to heal, right? The priest shall examine him again on the 7th day, and if the disease has abated and the disease has not spread in the skin, the priest shall pronounce him clean. It is only an eruption, and he shall wash his clothes and be clean. But if the eruption spreads in the skin after he has shown himself to the priest for his cleansing, he shall appear again before the priest. The priest shall make an examination, and if the eruption has spread in the skin, the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is a leprous disease. When a person contracts a leprous disease, he shall be brought to the priest, and it just goes on and on. There are 60 verses in this chapter talking about leprous diseases and skin issues, right? Talking about when there is on the skin of one's body a boil that has healed, and in the place of the boil there appears a white swelling or a reddish white spot, it shall be shown to the priest. We have when the body has a burn on the skin and the raw flesh of the burn becomes a spot, reddish white or white. The priest shall examine it. When a man or woman has a disease on the head or in the beard. When a man or woman has spots on the skin of the body, white spots. If anyone loses the hair from his head, he is bald, but he is clean. That's interesting, isn't it? If he loses the hair from his forehead and temples, he has baldness of the forehead, but he is clean. But if there is on the bald head or the bald forehead a reddish white diseased spot, it is leprous disease, breaking out on his bald head or his bald forehead. The priest shall examine him. If the diseased swelling is reddish white on his bald head or on his bald forehead, which resembles a leprous disease in the skin of the body, he is leprous, he is unclean. The priest shall pronounce him unclean, the disease is on his head. I mean, this needed to be, folks, time and time again, all the various, and I don't get me wrong, because I understand the issue of, contagion within a small group of people, blah, 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 but it's pretty interesting. And that's concerning clothing, right? And we're still in the leprous skin issues, right? If the priest, and then we've got all these others, it has not spread or it has spread, he shall tear the spot out of the cloth or not, right? And here's how we go about the cleansing in chapter 14. So we have all kinds of things about clean birds and cedar woods, and another freakishly long chapter, 60 verses in chapter 14 about how to handle that and make person clean after that. And then we get to everybody's favorite, chapter 15. The Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, "Speak to the people of Israel and say to them, when any man has a discharge from his member, from his flesh, his discharge makes him ceremonially unclean." Right? How many? And we're just talking about males. So who cares about women's ejaculation or various kinds of things that secrete, right? That are secreted. Right? Nobody cares about that. It's not listed. Women's secretions due to orgasm or various parts of things running smoothly down there. Not a concern. Not a concern. So when a discharge happens, it makes him ceremonially unclean. The uncleanness of his discharge is this: whether his flesh flows with his discharge or his flesh is stopped from discharging, it is uncleanness for him. Every bed on which the one with the discharge lies shall be unclean, and everything on which he sits shall be unclean. I mean, for couples who are having sex daily, like, you're never clean. You're just always unclean. What is that going to do to you psychologically? I mean, truly, what is that going to do to you? Anyone who touches his bed shall wash his clothes and bathe in water and be unclean until the evening. And all who sit on anything on which the one with the discharge has sat shall wash their clothes and bathe in water and be unclean until the evening. This really isn't clear which kind of a discharge we're talking about, right? Whether it's just the normal kind from ejaculation or some form of disease, pus, right? It's not clear. Any saddle on which the one with the discharge rides shall be unclean. Like, let's make sure we cover all the bases here. If the one with the discharge spits on persons who are clean, then they shall wash their clothes and bathe in water. Like, even does this even make any sense at this point? No, it does not, right? All those whom the one with the discharge touches without his having rinsed his hands in water shall wash their clothes, bathe in water, and be unclean until the evening. This is just exhausting, just reading through it. Any earthen vessel that the one with the discharge touches shall be broken. What? And every vessel of wood shall be rinsed in water. And then we have what happens when he's been cleansed of his discharge. If a man has an emission of semen, oh, that's different. But is it? Because we didn't clarify. Discharge from his member, an emission of semen. He shall bathe his whole body in water and be unclean until the evening. Everything made of cloth or of skin on which the semen falls shall be washed with water and be unclean until the evening. Very fascinating distinctions. If a man lies with a woman and has an emission of semen, both of them shall bathe in water and be unclean until the evening. This is assuming that this wasn't happening in the evening. So does that mean until the next evening? I don't know. Right? What the fuck is going on? Why do we do this? Why did someone do this and also agree to it for the last 2,500 years? Do you know what I'm saying? Whose idea was that? When a woman, here's the part that applies to people I also care about. When a woman has a discharge of blood, that is her regular discharge from her body, she shall be in her impurity for 7 days. I want to know what happens when the discharge takes longer than 7 days. So does that mean 7 days from when it stops? Does that mean you're assuming it's only going to last 7 days? She shall be in her impurity for 7 days, and whoever touches her shall be unclean until the evening. So presumably members of her family are going to be unclean for the duration of her menstruation. Everything upon which she lies during her impurity shall be unclean. Everything also upon which she sits shall be unclean. Whoever touches her bed shall wash his clothes and bathe in water and be unclean until the evening. Whoever touches anything upon which she sits shall wash his clothes and bathe in water and be unclean until the evening. Whether it is the bed or anything upon which she sits, when he touches it, he shall be unclean until the evening. If any man lies with her and her impurity falls on him, what an image that just gave me. He shall be unclean 7 days. And every bed on which he lies shall be unclean. I mean, that's why some people say you're not supposed to have sex during a woman's menstruation, which is so ridiculous. I mean, it's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. Oh, is anyone else just kind of exhausted by this? Like, it's so petty. It's just so petty. And it makes me really sad that there are people who continue to think this way, to think and talk about bodies. Menstruation, making a woman impure, is one of the most offensive things I've ever heard of. I think the same about an emission of semen, but that only lasts for a day. But even though, anyway, but you know what I'm saying? Like, I think the same of them both, but it makes me, it just makes me really angry that female bodies, the elements of female bodies specifically that are about bringing human life. I mean, that's the same with the semen ejaculation, right? The emission of semen is about human life. It's very fascinating. So there we are. I think we'll stop here. That was chapter 15. I didn't read all of it. I skipped over some of it. The end of chapter 15. Maybe I should read the end of that section. There's another different type of discharge of blood from a woman that's separate from her menstruation. All the different things, similar kinds of issues and bringing of turtle doves and things. Wrapping up this chapter, thus you shall keep the people of Israel separate from their uncleanness, so that they do not die in their uncleanness by defiling my tabernacle that is in their midst. My tabernacle that is splattered with animal blood shall not at all ever be brought in contact with human blood or human emission. This would be an offense. This is the ritual for those who have a discharge, for him who has an emission of semen, becoming unclean thereby, for her who is in the infirmity of her period. The infirmity. It's an like I am infirm when I am menstruating. You better believe that is not the case, because I would not be functioning if I were not hermid. I am anything but infirm in those days. I am singularly driven and focused. For anyone, male or female, who has a discharge, and for the man who lies with a woman who is unclean. These are the things you're to do. Moving on. So yeah, we'll pick up, well, chapter 16 doesn't apply, but there are a few more chapters that have some laws that do apply to my particular filter or theme. So we will pick up there on Tuesday. I'm going to see, are there any questions? I didn't really track with comments today. Is that, hey, Mike. Yeah, Carrie Ann, you just make some great comments here. I'm going to throw this on the screen for everyone to see. I'm exhausted by the dead weight of this keeping us from having a better society. Yeah, I mean, that's nicely said, right? We've progressed. We have progressed. Now you can get a cream for those symptoms. Yeah. I don't imagine there are any questions at this point, because it's really just reading it and talking about it and airing it out, if you will. I guess in the context of what we were reading, it's relevant. It's a bit of a pun, but we'll read through some more from Leviticus, probably wrap that up on Tuesday. So thanks for being here, those of you who could, and thanks for being here, watching it later, if that's what you've done. I appreciate you. I appreciate it, all of it. Thanks. Hope you have a good weekend. See you Tuesday.